Hi everyone, welcome to today's new video. Today I will be doing my August wrap up. I read 10 books in August and I'm gonna tell you my thoughts and my ratings on these books. Okay, so starting off the month, I read The Art of War by Sun Tzu and The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. So, I listened actually to these two as an audiobook because I wanted to see if classics were kind of my thing. I wanted to read a little more diversely. And I actually chose these two because they were on Spotify, nothing like serious. And I honestly like The Art of War better than that I liked The Metamorphosis, which was so strange because I actually heard quite a few good things about The Metamorphosis, but I honestly found it a bit boring. So for anyone who doesn't know The Metamorphosis, it's about this guy and one day he wakes up as like a huge insect, I think I don't remember what insect, but he's a huge beetle or whatever. And he's like, I need to work. I need to go. I need to do things. I need to provide for my family. While he knows that he is an insect. It was so strange. And it's about the relationship with his family that's changing because obviously he's not the man he was before. But it was a very strange book. And like I listened to it, so it was kind of entertaining, but I don't know if I would have read this if it wasn't for the audiobook. I don't think I would pick up a book to read this story. But yeah, it was still okay. I found it very entertaining because it was so strange. So I gave that one 3 stars. And then we had The Art of War, and it was a good book. For a classic, it was entertaining, but also it wasn't really a story. It was just about how war yeah, it's honestly in the name, The Art of War, but it's just about war strategics, and it's about all these tips actually for completing a war and winning a war. So it's about, oh, you should always seek high ground. You should always make sure your army is fed and they're not tired. And it's just how to win a war, which was not really my thing, but it was not completely horrible. But it was also better than The Metamorphosis, in my opinion, because it was a little more fast paced. It had more information, and the story, it wasn't really a story, but it still made more sense than The Metamorphosis. So I gave The Art of War 3.5 stars, which is pretty good actually. And then we get to a book that still haunts me, honestly, and that is Husky by Jessa Kane. I despise this book. I honestly need bleach for my eyes because I read this. And I know someone put in a lot of effort to write this, and I sound really harsh, which I am because I rate this one 1 star. But that's solely because it is pure smut. Because Husky is about a girl and she has never found love, and she is a fashion designer. She has her own fashion brand and she needs to do a runway show. So one day she's like so overworked, she goes to a bar and she meets this guy who she thinks is perfect as a runway model. And she describes him as really big and masculine, but mostly fat. The word used in that book is honestly only chunky, fat, big. I get that people say, oh, but it's so body positive because it's about this bigger guy. But the way she describes him isn't in a positive way. It's all fat, ugly. At least he himself calls himself ugly. And it's all about him being fat. So that really didn't do it for me. And then only the most part of the story was smut, and I don't mind a bit of smut, but I don't like a plot only consisting of smut. I also want a little bit of substance, which there was a bit of substance, but it wasn't enough to carry the story. So yeah, I rate this 1 star, and it still haunts me. Yeah, then we get to a bit of a controversial one, which is Restore Me. And before people will tell me, but oh my god, this series is amazing, you'll probably love it. No, I don't. I don't love this story. I don't love this series. I don't understand the hype. And you can't even complain to me like, oh, you just have to read until book 3. First of all, how could you say you need to read 3 whole books for the story to get good? But yeah, I read those, and now I'm at Restore Me, or actually I'm now at Defy Me, but I don't know if I will continue the series anytime soon. But I read Restore Me, I gave it 3 stars, and it was so incredibly boring. I feel like the world building is not nearly enough. Aaron Warner, he's lovely, don't get me wrong. I like him as a character, but that's mostly because he is just morally grey, honestly. And he's obsessed with Juliet, and I love a boy who's obsessed with his girl. So yeah, that's what I love. I don't hate Julia as a character. The characters are what makes the story readable. But there's not enough world building, there's not enough plot. I think if you would skip 200 pages every book, that still wouldn't be enough to make this book have a great plot. Because there's a little bit of plot in the beginning, then there is a whole lot of nothing, and then you have like this tiny bit of plot at the ending, which makes you want to go into the next book. But overall, it's just nothing. Only characters saying witty and funny things, which is amazing, and I love that, but it's just not enough for me to love this series. So I think I would give this series like a 3.5 in general. Definitely not more. But yeah, that's a bit of disappointment from my side. Then we have Fourth Wing. So I read it because obviously the hype was too great not to not pick this up. And I loved it. Honestly, I loved it. I definitely took my time reading this book because I honestly think this book is so fast-paced that it sometimes is a little too fast-paced. Because there's so little world building in the first bit of the book that it makes it a bit too fast. You get to a point when it's like 200 pages in and you're like, okay, this must be a story. Why is there another 300 pages? Because it feels like everything happens in the first 200 pages. From getting into the War College to reaching a point where she's actually kind of done with her first year. It's a bit too much, for me at least. So yeah, I had to I had to put this down for a little bit and then pick it back up later, which I did, and I loved it. So that is definitely the way to go for me. For everyone who doesn't know this story, actually, it's about Violet. And Violet is a really, really strong girl, but she also has a disability, which makes her bones and her entire body actually weak. She's really easily hurt, and she's just a little weaker than the other people. And in the Writers Squadron, it's really important, obviously, to be physically strong. But yeah, she is one of the strongest female main characters that I've ever read about, which is amazing. I love that about her. And I also love our male main character, which is Xaden. Xaden is awesome. He is like the opposite of Dane, the other main character. Well, not main character. The other boy in this book, who is like so protective, but not in a good way over Violet. But Xaden is... I love him. So yeah, this is about Violet going into that really, really dangerous war college. And it's about her journey in their war college. And the last part is about a little bit of a battle, which broke my heart. I sobbed like a little baby reading this book, and I still can't get over the ending, and I need the next book right away. But I'll have to wait for a little while. But yeah, I gave this 5 stars if it wasn't obvious already. And I will definitely pick up the next book. Then I have a highly anticipated read for me personally, which was Assassin's Blade. This book was so sad, but also one of the best fantasy books. Like the first fantasy book in a series for me personally, because I loved the Assassin's Blade. I gave it 4 stars, which is really good actually. And oh, I love our main character. I never really am able to pronounce her name correctly, but I think it's like Selena. Correct me if I'm wrong. But she is badass. I love her. I love her so much. And it's a bit of a love story. It's maybe a tiny little spoiler, but also not really, because everyone and their mom knows Throne of Glass. But she falls in love with someone, and it's just, the story is beautiful. But also, I was so sad at the end. For everyone who read the series, they will know. But yeah, I started off with this one because I saw Destiny Sidwell talk about the whole series and with what book you should start. And she said, start with the Assassin's Blade, that's perfect, there's nothing wrong with that, just do it. So I did, and I loved it. And then I read Throne of Glass, the first book, and I loved it so much. I don't know what it is with Sarah J. Maas books, but they are never below 4 stars for me personally. She writes such amazing fantasy, but also like a romancy. It just makes me want to read more and more and more. So yeah, I read Throne of Glass, and like I said, I love it. I love the premise of this book. Obviously, from going from the Assassin's Blade to Throne of Glass, I already kind of knew what I was getting into, but this book was just amazing. Absolutely amazing. I don't know how to explain it better without spoiling it, because I truly think you should get into this series not knowing that much about it. But it was just, oh, I love this series, and I will definitely be continuing the series this month. I just know it for sure. But yeah, I gave Throne of Glass 4.25 stars. Then I read Divine Rivals. And obviously I only read it because of the hype. I don't think I would have picked this one up otherwise. But the premise of it was really good. Let's say that as first. I loved this book. I thought the romance was really cute. But I also think it wasn't enemies to lovers, which is kind of what people promoted it to be. And that was a bit disappointing to me, because they were hardly rivals. She was just a bit annoyed with him, and everyone was like, oh my god, but they're enemies. No, they weren't. They were no enemies in this book. And that's why it felt to me like it was too quick from going to enemies to lovers, because it was over like this, the enemy part of it. But their love story was really cute. I love Iris, I love Rowan. They're adorable. But I also think because this was promoted as a fantasy romance or romance fantasy, doesn't really matter, but I think the fantasy part was just tiny little, because it's about these two people who can like connect with each other by writing through their typewriters, and they do that while one is at war, because there's a war between like two gods, and one goes as a reporter to that war, and they keep in touch through their typewriters, which is such an amazing premise. But I think this book was a little too short, actually. I never say that about books, but this book could have been a bit longer, so it could have been a little more smoothly because it went really, really fast. But yeah, the ending of it was super unexpected. So I will definitely be reading the second one if I have the time, obviously. But yeah, I kind of liked it. So I gave this 4 stars. Not a 5-star read for me, but 4 stars was like, it was pretty solid. Then I read Caraval, because I read Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber before Caraval, but I loved her writing, I loved her fantasy, and I was like, why not try another series of hers? So I read Caraval, I really liked it. I don't know why, but I only gave this 3.5 stars at the time, but I keep thinking about it. I think about this series probably once a day, which is a lot for me. So I'm probably gonna up it to 4 stars. But yeah, it is about Scarlett and Donatella, and they have always wanted to go to like a circus, which is called Caraval. And Donatella was writing The Master of Caraval, which is Legend, for years and years and years. Like, please come to our city, please come to us, because they couldn't leave the island because their dad is like really abusive. But this year they went to Caraval, and there are all kind of things happening there, because there's not really a spoiler because it's on the back of the book. But Donatella goes missing, and Scarlett needs to find her before Caraval's over. So it was so interesting. I read this book in like 2 days and I loved it. So I'm probably gonna up my rating, definitely actually. Then we have the last book I read in August, which is A Court of Wings and Ruin. I've been wanting to finish this book since last month. I think it honestly took me a month to get through this book, which is kind of bad actually, because I loved it and it's my favorite book in the series. I don't know why people love Echo over Echo War, because this book was everything Echo wasn't. I thought Echo was too slow paced. There was a big chunk in the middle which did nothing. Honestly, nothing. It was just dragging out the relationship, what was going to happen between Rhysand and Feyre. But this book was fast paced, even though, once again, Sarah J. Maas loves dragging out the plot. This is honestly about war. If people didn't know that, I'm sorry, it's not that much of a spoiler. This book is about the war. But there wasn't a war. Until maybe here. Here there was a war. Not here. This whole book is about war. This was war. This wasn't. So yeah, that was pretty dragged out. But still, the found family in this book was immaculate. And that's what I honestly miss in Akhomov, because everyone was talking about, oh, this is the best found family you'll ever read about. But Akhomov was still, meh. This was it. Honestly, this was it. And I loved the relationship between Feyre and Rhysand was more developed in this book than it was in Akhomov. Obviously, that was the beginning of it. This was the middle. This was amazing. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. And I would definitely reread this one eventually, because it will probably take me another month. So those are all the books I read in August. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!